It's been 3 years since I last made a beginner's guide for Age of Wonders 4, and in that time it's had a bunch of DLCs and, in true Paradox fashion, basically become a whole new game. So today we're back with an updated complete beginner's guide to Age of Wonders 4. When starting up a game, especially if you have a bunch of DLC, it can be pretty overwhelming. There are a ton of realms and factions to choose from, and knowing what any of them mean can be a lot. If it's your very first game, then I highly recommend you go with the Fields of Rebirth beginner scenario. It's the easiest by far, with the suggested difficulty being relaxed, but you can turn it up if you're feeling brave. Outside of this, realms are divided into two types. Story realms have a main story that you will be following as the game progresses. This will provide you with various objectives, story events, and lore, all of which can be useful for giving you some direction in your first few games. The exact story and questline will vary from realm to realm, but all you really need to know is the more skulls they have, the tougher they're going to be. You can adjust the difficulty of any realm and hover over each trait to get a little more insight into what you can expect, but I'm going to be real, until you've played a bunch, most of these aren't going to mean anything to you. You will eventually understand what tomes having no affinity requirements means, but when you're first getting started, they might as well be telling you how many Gleep Gorps you can get from your bungus. Challenge realms have no story to follow and instead act as a sandbox with various modifiers to change up how the game and world can be played. Once again, the traits tell you more about each one, but these won't mean anything right now. These can be adjusted a lot more than story realms, allowing you to change basic settings like map size and player count, as well as advanced ones allowing you to essentially create a whole new realm of your own. I'm not going to go too in depth into this since realm creation is its own art form, but essentially you choose a bunch of modifiers that contribute to whatever map is procedurally generated afterwards. Personally, I'd suggest sticking to story realms for your first few games, as the narratives will help you learn how to progress your faction and teach you the ropes through some more directed gameplay. The worlds you load into will still be sandboxes, there will just be a little bit more guidance to make things happen, which will only help you learn the game. After you've chosen your realm, you need to choose a faction, and once again, there are far too many options to choose from, along with the ability to create your own. It would take me weeks to explain them all, so I'll instead explain what each section means and how it affects your actual gameplay. Starting from the top, we have your faction affinity. Affinity comes in 6 flavors, and your factions will evolve over the course of the game based on things like research. It doesn't massively affect things outside of relations with others, since opposing affinities tend not to get along. Your champion shows the class of your starting hero, which dictates their skill tree and what equipment they can use. Your starting tome decides what research you'll be able to work on from the start. Your race comes with various traits that you can see directly below and can affect all kinds of things for both campaign and combat. Your culture and society traits provide your faction with various effects and affinities to help dictate your optimal playstyle. Finally, ambition is a goal your hero will want to work towards over the course of the game to gain bonuses from renown. A lot of this is for role-playing purposes, since Age of Wonders 4 is as much an RPG as it is a strategy game, so there's no wrong answers and it all comes down to what you want to do. For your very first campaign, one of the boring, good aligned factions are your best bets, so the Destined Humans, First Elves, or Wholesome Halflings to name a few. You can technically choose any you want, but evil factions inherently become more difficult since you are more likely to go to war with other factions and have less friends. Whoever you choose, once you select, you can load into game and we can try and make this menagerie of a UI a little easier to digest. Like most Paradox games, the UI can be extremely overwhelming, but I promise you only need to make active use of like 2 of these areas on a regular basis, so we'll cover these first. At the top middle of the screen you have your gold, mana, and world casting points. Gold is a general currency used for everything from buildings to units to trade deals to just about everything. As long as this number is going up and you have some in reserves, you are usually all good. Mana is required to cast spells both in campaign and battle, so you always want to have a little on hand should you need it. Lastly, world map casting points is how much magic you can cast in any given turn. This just means spells that have more than this will take multiple turns to complete and isn't as important as the other two, but I may as well cover it while I'm here. The other area you'll want to pay lots of attention to is the bottom right. Here you can see everything you need to do before ending your turn in a neat little stack. This can be things like giving units orders, setting research, production queues, and more. But as long as you click on each one and ensure you complete their tasks, you are honestly halfway to knowing how to play. The other important areas here are the spell button, which takes you to the spellbook. From here you can see any available world map, active or combat spells your faction has access to, and I'll cover each of these in detail later. You have your alignment, which is just under your porthole. This is basically how good or evil your faction is, and this affects how others in-game treat you during diplomacy. Lastly, you have the end turn button, which, you guessed it, ends the current turn. As I said, there is far more UI than just this, but it honestly makes more sense to explain each aspect as we cover each area of the game. Speaking of which, the largest area of the game by far is city and empire development. These are technically two separate things, but they really do feed into each other, so we'll handle them as one. Most factions start out with a single city, and these are how you earn the majority of your resources. You can see what resources each city provides from the right of their overview, and on the left you can see their three types of production and current stability. Food contributes to increasing the city's population, production is used to build new structures, and draft is for recruiting new units. Stability is basically how happy your city is, and the higher the level, the more bonus production you gain in all three categories. If this becomes too low, you start to suffer production penalties and eventually defecting provinces, so avoid this as much as you possibly can. All city production is affected by two things. Firstly is any provinces it controls. These are gained each time you gain a new population point and allow you to expand the borders of your cities whilst increasing their production. You have all kinds of options for the type of province you want to build that varies depending on the terrain and special tiles such as pastures or resource deposits. There's not really a bad option since cities can focus on more or less anything you want, so it all comes down to who you're playing as and what your goals are. Secondly, production is affected by any structures you build inside the cities themselves. There is a vast number of these to affect every single type of production, so it once again comes down to you and your goals. Most structures can have their production boosted by the city owning a certain number of a certain type of province, and you can see these by hovering over each building. Boosted structures have a reduced build time and cost, so it can be pretty well worth working towards to grow cities quickly and cheaply. If you have no structures queued up, a city will instead convert 25% of its production into gold, which isn't super efficient, so try to always be building if you can. The other thing you can do with cities is recruit new units. This costs gold, and the time is based on the amount of draft production the city has. One thing to note for both structures and units is that you can queue up a bunch at once, but this does instantly consume that gold, so avoid this unless you're really swimming in the stuff. Likewise, if you're producing no units, then 25% of draft is converted to food, which still isn't very efficient, but you also probably don't need to constantly produce units all game long, so you don't need to worry about it as much. One final stat to pay attention to in cities is their fortification health. This isn't as important, but all it means is how long the city will be able to hold out during a siege, so the higher it is, the harder the city is to take. You may have also noticed these two numbers next to gold and mana, and these are where we get into some empire development. Knowledge dictates your research speed, and research in-game is divided into tomes. Each time you complete some research, you are presented with 3 choices from all of your unlocked tomes, which at the beginning will include your starting tome, a short one for your culture, and a shared one with upgrades for your scouting units. Every few research cycles, you can choose to unlock a new tome, and there are a massive number to choose from. You can pick any tier 1 and eventually 2 tome you like, but for tiers 3, 4, and 5, you will need 3, 6, and 8 affinity for that tome's affinity. Speaking of which, just selecting a tome will grant your faction some affinity, so they're a huge part in deciding the direction of your faction. Research projects themselves usually provide access to new units and spells for use in both campaign and battle. New units and combat spells I can save for the combat chapter, but campaign spells are another crucial pillar of empire development. They usually do one of 2 things. They either affect certain unit types in your faction, such as upgrading your scouts with greater vision, or transform your entire race to grant bonuses to all units. These can take multiple turns to be ready to be cast based on your world casting points, and once cast remain active permanently unless you manually choose to disable them. Unit-specific upgrades can also increase the upkeep cost of units, so be aware of potential expenses before you commit to a spell you can't afford. The last area of empire development is of course empire development. This is where affinities really start to affect your gameplay outside of just diplomacy. The more affinity you have, the faster these bars will begin to fill up. Once they reach certain thresholds, you'll be able to spend Imperium to unlock all kinds of upgrades for all areas of your faction, and Imperium is gained via later game city structures in the Wizard Tower and by taking control of Ancient Wonders. There are 2 types of developments on each tree, single use and repeatable, and you can tell which is which from their shape. As for which ones are good to get, I mean there are far too many to go through, and the answer is usually a big fat it depends. However, you can't go wrong with the general line to unlock many essential abilities like travelling across water, building roads, and forced march. Basically, every option here is good, so it really is hard to go wrong no matter what you pick, as long as it works for you and your faction. We've mentioned how to manage cities, but how do you get more? To gain new cities, you have a few options. Most factions can move their heroes into empty tiles and establish an outpost, which can then be upgraded into a city. Your other 2 options are integrating city-states and invading other faction cities, both of which are better explained in their own sections. Your faction also has a city capacity, and whilst you can go over this if you wish, it is generally advised that you don't, as you will begin to suffer some hefty economic penalties. To increase city capacity, you can make use of empire developments. Cities can also have fairly expansive borders, so make sure you leave lots of room between them to ensure you're not too cramped. Other than that, go wild. More cities means more kinds of production and income, and the only downside is keeping them safe, so as long as you can manage that, they're always a great investment. The other essential part of your faction is of course your heroes and armies. Heroes have two main functions, governing and armies. Governing first, since it is extremely straightforward. Each city can have a hero assigned to be their governor, and this affects the city's production in various ways based on their level of renown. If you are really min-maxing cities for a specific task, then a synergistic hero is a great way to do so. And that really is it. Moving over to combat, and everyone starts the game with their faction leader acting as their hero, leading a full stack of weaker units. Heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and classes, and this dictates what they'll be able to do in combat and what equipment they'll be able to make use of. Right-clicking on your hero's portrait will take you to this page where you can do a whole bunch. First off, you can see their ambition on the left and what you'll need to do to achieve it. The more you do this, the higher their renown level rises, and this provides their army and city with all kinds of bonuses. Clicking on this chest icon lets you customize your hero's gear should you have collected any. There are all kinds of items available for every single gear slot, and the effects range from minor stat bonuses to whole new abilities and even changing the ways your heroes engage in combat. Once again, there is no right way to set up a hero, so just build them for the job you want them performing in combat. Items are found through all kinds of methods like completing quests, beating NPC armies, and can also be crafted in the item forge. Equipment requires a variety of items and ingredients based on what exactly you want to build, such as binding essence, which is made from disenchanting existing items, as well as the various unique resources found in the world map. Item crafting isn't something you need to make use of, and is more so there as an option should you want any items with very specific effects, or just want to make better use of a bunch of stuff you have sitting in your inventory. This button to the right takes you to their skill tree, and from here you can upgrade them in a huge number of ways. Their hero type will have some unique skills over on the left, the middle has skills pertaining to their class, and on the right you have signature skills which unlock every 4 levels, and allow you to choose an affinity to imbue them with, gaining you access to more upgrades, and the options you have to access this are based on your faction's affinities. There isn't really any right answer when it comes to what skill points to pick, so just have a scan and pick the one that works best for that hero in that army in that faction. Lastly, you can view all the hero's stats, traits, and abilities on the right. Your capacity for heroes grows as the game goes on and can be manually increased at the cost of Imperium. When recruiting a new hero, you are presented with a number of choices and have to pick one or pay gold to reshuffle a new selection. All you want to look at when recruiting a new one is their class in combat, governor type, and ambition. If you can find one that aligns well with your goals as a faction, then you are onto a winner. As for using heroes in actual combat, well, that's where we get into how exactly battles work. When you find yourself in battle, regardless of who attacked who, you have two choices, auto or manual combat. Auto simply works out the battle without you having to actually control your unit. It can be a good way to skip battles that you would easily win to save yourself a little time. That said, they can be quite costly on casualties, and normally you can do a better job if you play them yourself. Luckily, you can always retry a battle if you don't like the outcome, and whether you do this or hit manual up front, you will be launched into combat. Combat in Wonders 4 is completely turn-based, and every unit has 3 action points. Up to 2 of these can be used by movement, allowing you to position your units on the map before committing to an attack. Most attacks normally end that unit's turn afterwards, so ensuring units are in the correct position beforehand sounds basic but is extremely important to remember. Alongside attacking, there is a large number of abilities that can be used, such as healing without ending your turn, allowing you to move in, get an ability off, and get out all in the same turn if you play your cards right. There's also a huge number of different units that vary from culture to culture, but all you really need to know are the main types. Melee troops obviously deal damage up close and personal, and are usually pretty good at tanking damage whilst doing so. Ranged troops like archers deal damage from a range and benefit from superior positioning such as high ground. Support troops can deal damage, but their main purpose is usually aiding other units with healing, buffs, and more. Mounted units also need to go up close and personal to deal damage, but benefit from charging up to their target to maximise their damage and minimise the risk of any coming back. Then you also have scouts, which aren't really meant for combat and should more focus on exploring the map when they can. There are many more units than just these, but most options fall into one of these categories, so the advice for them is not that different. The goal of combat is of course to wipe out all enemies before they do the same to you, and whilst this is extremely straightforward, combat has a lot of complexity to it that can aid you in completing this goal. Tactics like flanking to hit enemies in the rear can allow you to deal much more damage and knock them off balance, making any attacks they make afterwards a lot weaker. Utilising defense mode and various auras can make your units harder to take down even if they're not doing that much attacking themselves. Then we have combat spells. Similar to the world map spells, these cost your shared mana pool, and you only have a limited number of combat casting points you can use per battle. This makes more expensive spells very high risk, high reward, as they can give you a huge advantage but come with the cost of locking you out of future magic use. Once again, spells come in all kinds with buffs, debuffs, damage, summons and more, so the right spells to use as usual comes down to your army in combat and what you need. But the bottom line is do not ignore spells because they can normally offer you something to make achieving victory that much easier. The last thing to worry about in combat is morale, and this is basically how confident your troops are. Morale is affected by things like damage taken, the current tide of combat, and any recently killed units on either side. If your morale is high, units will deal bonus damage. Too low, and they have an increased chance to deal less damage and can even begin routing if it becomes too low. Most of the time you can just worry about HP, but it's always worth keeping an eye on just in case the enemy is sapping it away. The last thing you want is to be winning a battle only to lose because everyone runs away. As for some final combat tips, positioning really is the most important aspect of Wonders combat. Getting the right units on the flank and high ground can make a huge amount of difference, so ensure everyone has the best positioning possible to give yourself an edge. Do not forget about spells and ensure you understand how their effects work before just tossing them out. Try to target weak enemies first to get rid of easy threats and reduce the overall amount of damage coming back your way. And remember that heroes are supposed to be the strongest units in your armies, so be sure to put them to work rather than sitting at the back too scared to take a hit. And finally, you can always restart combat at any point, so when you're learning the game, do not be ashamed to try battle a few times. Now you know how to fight, we need to work out who to fight, and that's what diplomacy is for. Diplomacy in Wonders 4 is separated into two areas: rulers and free cities. Free cities first, since they are the simplest. When you meet one, provided you have one available, you can give them a Whispering Stone to initiate a relationship, so to speak. These are a limited resource that can be increased by certain empire developments. Once they have a Whispering Stone, their allegiance to you will slowly grow as the turns go on, and this can be sped up by spending Imperium to boost it. There are 3 stages of allegiance. A pact of cooperation allows trading and open borders. A pact of loyalty shares vision and resources, along with contributing to the rally of lieges. And real quick, this is simply a mechanic where every few turns you can hire units from free cities for some gold, either for use in your own armies or to defend the free city itself. It's pretty much just a way to get some units quicker, so give it a glance whenever you can. Lastly, a pact of vassalage shares more resources with you, cuts off other rulers from negotiation, and means they will join you in any wars. There's also a number of vassal tiers that just increase the amount of goods you gain from them, but at the max tier you gain the option to integrate the city to essentially convert it to one of your own, granting you full control. This sounds like a lot, but most of the time you just toss a Whispering Stone their way and wait for them to become a vassal. It really is just that simple. Other rulers, however, require a bit more manual labour to see eye to eye. Whenever you meet a new ruler, you have the option to give them a little gold to get things moving in the right direction, or just head straight into normal diplomacy. From here, you negotiate, which allows you to request various pacts, treaties, and trade goods back and forth. This is generally how you become pally with someone, so if you want some allies, you're going to be focusing on this area up here. Pronouncements are where you can declare a ruler as your friend or rival. Both of these cost gold up front and upkeep per turn and slowly trend your relations either way. Fabricating a grievance essentially creates a reason for you to declare a justified war, and denouncing essentially loudly complains about a grievance to reduce their relations with other rulers you've met. Speaking of which, you can settle existing grievances by either paying them off or forgiving them. Both can be good options if you want to avoid conflict, but as usual, it all depends on what you want to do. Declaring war on another ruler must be justified, and all this means is you need enough grievances to justify the war, otherwise you will suffer penalties to relations with others as well as your own alignment. Once at war, it's pretty straightforward what you need to do to win. Beat their armies in combat and capture their cities whilst defending your own until they have nothing left. Of course, doing this is much easier said than done, since rulers will often have much more powerful armies than you can find roaming the wilds of the world map. On top of this, assaulting other cities adds further complexities, with sieges requiring multiple turns to allow you access to enemy cities before you can even worry about battling them. Sieges are started by simply attacking a city, and the length of the siege is based on your army's fortification damage and the city's fortification health. During sieges, you can complete various siege projects to make the ensuing battle easier by building siege equipment, damaging walls, softening up enemies, and more. Siege battles themselves work like normal battles, only the maps are heavily in favour of the defender, so you'll have to work a little more to come out on top. If you do manage to win a siege battle, you will have a few options of what to do with the city. You can absorb it, which is fairly straightforward, migrate it into one of your currently controlled races, which does the same thing but kills the current inhabitants, which of course gives you some evil alignment. Create a vassal, or raise it, which destroys it and grants you lots of gold and lots of evil alignment. None of these are wrong options, it all just depends who you're playing as, your goals and playstyle. So if you're trying to be good, then absorb or vassalize are obviously the better choices. Even something as simple as not going over your city limit is a good reason to vassalize, so make sure you consider everything before you decide. Once you manage to take out all of a ruler's cities, they'll be knocked out of the game and you'll win the war. And now you know how to win a war, we need to quickly go over how to win the entire game. Winning the game usually has 4 options. Military victory, where you defeat all of the rulers in the game, expansion victory, where you occupy a certain number of provinces and then build and defend 3 key structures, magic victory, where you complete enough high tier research, capture a gold ancient wonder, which are these landmarks that appear on the map, launch a special spell and defend your wonder whilst it completes, or score victory, which essentially tallies up all of your achievements and compares them to everyone else. This acts as more of a fallback option in case none of the other 3 get done first. Certain story realms will also have their own victory conditions tied into specific quest chains, and others can have additional options such as world seals. The bottom line is, you have a lot of options, so no matter how you want to play, there is some way for you to win without diverging you from your playstyle. If you want to be super aggressive and fight others, or peaceful and focusing on expansion or magic, there are options for everyone, so don't think you're going to be railroaded any way in particular. But if you need a little more convincing to tell if Age of Wonders 4 is for you, then check out this video with 10 reasons to check it out for Total War Warhammer 3 players.